On our wedding day, the movie star groom ran away. The reason? His ex-girlfriend had suffered a car accident, lost her memory, and forgotten that they'd broken up years ago. Her memory was stuck in their most loving moments together. He couldn't abandon her, so he left me, along with dozens of guests, without a second thought. The entire wedding was broadcast nationwide. Everyone watched as Charles missed the wedding for his ex-girlfriend, and they watched as I finished the ceremony with someone else. Chapter 1. Charles received his ex-girlfriend's call just before the wedding began. The wedding's about to start. Can't it wait until after the ceremony? There's still over half an hour. I'll be back soon. He left without looking back. Even when all the guests had arrived, he hadn't returned. Our 20 years together, our shared history from childhood, ended in an instant. Chloe. Charles still isn't answering. What do we do? Should we keep waiting? My best friend, Julia, had called him over a dozen times with no luck. Panic written all over her face. I lifted my eyes to the mirror, gazing at the reflection of myself in a beautiful wedding dress. Makeup perfect. I stood in silence for a moment before turning to Julia. I said softly, "No, we won't wait. Let's go ahead. Then I'll go tell everyone to eat and then leave." Wait, what did you say? Julia blinked in surprise, realizing I didn't mean canceling the wedding but proceeding as planned. But how can we start without Charles? I patted her head, chuckling. You think I can't get married without him? That I'm bound to Charles alone? Does Charles really think I'm just waiting around for him? That he's my only option? When I said I'd find any man to finish the ceremony, Julia looked like she was about to cry. I pinched her cheek, assuring her, "Don't look so sad. Today's my wedding day, not a funeral." But it's fine. Let's go. Chapter 2. Charles and I grew up together. We'd known each other since before grade school. When he wanted to enter the entertainment industry, I went with him to art school. He studied acting, and I specialized in talent management. From the moment he debuted, I became his manager. Yes, he did have a deeply passionate romance back then with a girl who was our college classmate. But before his career took off, they parted ways. During that time, Charles drowned his sorrows, refusing all work. I couldn't just watch him spiral, so I dragged him on a road trip. We traveled for over 2 months, from the Mongolian grasslands to the Tibetan snow-capped mountains, and across the vast deserts of Xinjiang. I showed him the wonders of our homeland. When we returned, he was like a new man, calm, focused. In his most intense period, he'd shoot 4 movies in a year, dedicating every hour to acting, eating, and sleeping. After years of hard work, he finally earned the recognition of the entertainment industry. 3 years ago, he won a prestigious Best Actor award, becoming a top-tier celebrity, a household name. 6 months ago, he won another Best Actor award at the Oscars and, in front of everyone, proposed to me. With deep emotion, he thanked me for the years of support, saying he couldn't have reached this point without me. He promised to repay me for the rest of his life. I was moved to tears. At that moment, I thought that nothing but life and death could ever separate us. Now, I finally understand, separating us was easy. All it took was one call from Miriam. Chapter 3. When the wedding was announced to begin, everyone assumed Charles had returned to marry me. But that wasn't the case. I found a young actor from our company to marry me instead. He was only 22, a fresh face we'd just signed. "Marry me, and I'll make you the next Charles," I said, walking directly up to him with a straightforward offer. As one of the top managers in the industry, with influence over half of the entertainment scene, I was confident that no aspiring star would refuse me. Sure enough, just as I predicted, Benjamin blushed for a few seconds and, after a brief hesitation, took my hand. "If you won't regret it, I'll stay with you to finish this act," he whispered in my ear, his voice soft but firm. "I don't just want this one performance. I might ask for a few years of your youth. Are you willing?" I asked quietly, and when he nodded with resolve, I smiled. "In less than 3 years, you'll be a household name," I promised him in return. He looked down thoughtfully, replying softly, "I believe in your abilities, but I won't, nor do I want to, become the next Charles. I was still pondering his words when he took my hand and led me toward the altar, saying, "Let's go, my beautiful bride." The wedding proceeded as planned, and the live stream exploded with reactions. Comment section: "Whoa, whoa, whoa, did the groom change? You're late on the news. Ku's at the hospital with his ex." "No way. Ku ditched his wedding for his ex? Poor Chloe. Poor her. She deserves it. Did you forget how she broke them up back then?" The fans went wild, even bringing up old accusations. Back then, photos of Charles and Miriam together had been leaked, and he'd made their relationship public. Contrary to fears, his fans overwhelmingly supported them. When they broke up, I took Charles on a trip to lift his spirits, but the paparazzi twisted the story, portraying me as the one who had torn them apart. I had tried explaining, but no one wanted to believe me. Aren't these fans just brainless? They broke up years ago, and you and Charles got together only after that. How does that make you a homewrecker? Julia was furious, furiously replying to the commenters. Julia's comments: "Chloe isn't a homewrecker. She and Charles only got together long after he and Miriam split, and it was Charles who pursued Chloe. And today, Chloe's the one left stranded at her wedding. Victim blaming much? Move on." Who's speaking up for that washed-up Chloe? Probably her own fake account, claiming Ku pursued her? Ku isn't blind. Chloe forced him by using his career against him after driving away Miriam. Oh, these keyboard warriors really think they can say anything without consequences? I'll track this one down and sue for defamation. Julia fumed, reaching for her phone, but I stopped her. Don't waste your energy on kids. You know I don't care about this stuff. After so many years in the industry, I've grown a thick skin. Words like these can't hurt me. What mattered to me was always Charles's opinion. Well, that was before. Now, he's no longer important to me. Chapter 4. My marriage to Benjamin became a hot topic, as did the fact that Charles was at the hospital with his first love. Photos of him holding Miriam in his arms went viral. In the picture, apart from a bandage around her head, she looked uninjured. Yet Charles stayed by her side for 3 hours before he finally returned. Benjamin and I had just returned home after registering our marriage when Charles barged in. He stormed in, and Benjamin and I turned to face him simultaneously. I waved the red marriage certificate in my hand. "It's fine if you're late for the wedding. Just remember to send a gift." "Chloe!" His face hardened as he strode in, snatching the certificate from my hand, his brows knitting. "Are you serious?" "Yes." I smiled, took the certificate back from him, and dismissed him with a wave. "You missed too much. The banquet's over, and the guests have already made enough noise over the bridal chamber. If there's nothing else, my husband and I would like to enjoy our wedding night now. So please leave." "Ku, you married some random guy just to spite me?" How amusing. He had been the one to abandon me and dozens of wedding guests for his ex-girlfriend, and now he stood there, questioning me as if he were the victim. This isn't random. I carefully chose Benjamin as my marriage partner. "Charles, there are plenty of people better than you in this world. I don't need you. Your place isn't irreplaceable." The truth was, I chose Benjamin because he was the only guy in formal attire that day who caught my eye. "Chloe, what do you mean by that?" Exactly what I said, meaning, I'm done with you. I'm not here to serve you anymore. Yes, I'd loved him for years, but I never expected he'd humiliate me like this. "Fine. Great." Charles clenched his fists, casting a cold glance at Benjamin. He sneered. "You think this guy has what it takes to make it in the industry?" "Charles." Benjamin had just joined the company, and we weren't close before today. But since I chose him, I was prepared to stand by him. Before I could respond, Benjamin stepped forward to shield me. "Senior, it's true I'm not as famous as you are, and I might not reach your level anytime soon, but at least, I wouldn't let a woman who sacrificed so much for me be humiliated at her own wedding. 6 months ago, you proposed to her before the world, making a big spectacle. Today, you abandoned her at a wedding broadcasted for everyone to see. If I were you, I'd be ashamed to stand here. What gives you the right to judge me?" Charles was too proud to hear any criticism. I felt a pang of sadness because I knew I bore some responsibility for the person he'd become. I didn't refuse to marry you. I only asked you to wait. Why couldn't you wait for me? He still tried to shift the blame, accusing me of not waiting. But could I really have waited? I waited too long, and I got tired. From my teenage years to now, at 28, I'd spent a quarter of my life waiting for him, but he disappointed me too many times. I supported him step by step as he climbed to the top, hoping he'd prove Miriam wrong. In the end, they united against me. Fine, Chloe. Just don't regret this. Charles spat before storming out. Regret? I certainly won't regret this. But Charles, I'm very capable of making you regret it. Don't forget who helped you reach where you are today. Charles, I'll tell you right now, you weren't half as promising as Benjamin when you started out. Vroom. The sound of his sports car roared as he sped away. When he was gone, I leaned against the wall, finally letting myself relax. Chloe, are you okay? Benjamin came over, helping me up with concern. I took a deep breath, straightened up, and smiled at him. I'm fine. The road ahead is going to be a long one, and it might get tough. Be prepared. I'm ready. I'm not afraid. Chapter 5. Charles may have been the one who ran away from the wedding, but public opinion is entirely against me. Online, everyone is saying I brought this upon myself. They call me the one who destroyed his love 6 years ago. Charles hasn't said a word to explain. When reporters interviewed Miriam at the hospital, she spoke innocently. The car accident injured my head, and I can't remember anything from the past few years. I just remember how much Charles and I loved each other. We even planned to get married after graduation. I can't believe we ever broke up. With just those words, she all but told everyone that I was the third wheel who stole Charles away for 6 years. As soon as this interview aired, sympathetic messages for her poured in. Comments. My heart aches for her. No wonder she left the country without a word back then. She was probably forced out. Don't cry, sis. We'll protect your happiness. Julia, unable to bear it, posted a message subtly mocking Miriam for leaving when Charles had nothing, only to return pretending amnesia now that he's famous, dragging innocent me into the mess. After this post, a few big influencers eager for drama shared it widely. It quickly reached Miriam in the hospital. 2 hours later, news broke that Miriam had attempted suicide. Miriam, is it true? Charles asked softly. Did you leave me back then because you thought I'd never make it? Miriam sat on the windowsill, crying delicately, and Charles comforted her gently. It's not true, you never looked down on me. It was my fault. That single phrase, it was my fault, confirmed me as the villain, although he later tried to explain, saying he'd wronged Miriam because he was too young back then to give her the life she deserved, and that our relationship had started long after. No one believed him. People only sympathize with the weak. Charles was no exception. My friend, well-meaning as she was, had made everything worse. Chapter 6. When I was at my wit's end, Charles called me, over the phone. He demanded, Chloe, was this worth it? I was the one who ended things with Miriam. I let her go, and her memory loss is real. Stop assuming the worst. Assume the worst? I laughed bitterly. Charles, we've known each other for over 20 years. Is that really what you think of me? Exactly, because we've known each other for so long. I know what you're like. You'll do anything to get what you want. You'd even hide your own family for appearances. Wouldn't you? Each word cut through me like a knife, leaving my heart in tatters. As his manager and close friend, I'd watched him grow, and he'd seen the lengths I went to for him. How I lowered myself to please investors and secure opportunities. He knew about the times I lied, claiming to come from an ordinary family and that my parents had passed away. Realizing he'd struck a nerve, Charles fell silent for a moment, then softened his tone. Chloe, I don't want things to be this tense between us. I'm sorry about the wedding, and I want to make it up to you. But please, come to the hospital and explain things to Miriam. She's only remembering the best times, and I don't want her to suffer. You just don't want to lose someone who's still longing for you, do you? I replied, cutting to the heart of his intentions. Yesterday, he'd claimed he wanted to marry me and only asked me to wait. But today, he's changed completely. After knowing him for over 20 years, I suddenly felt like I didn't know him at all. Fine. I'll go explain. I was curious to see what game Miriam was playing. Chapter 7. The moment I saw Miriam, I knew she was faking her memory loss. Chloe, Miriam's eyes glistened as she called my name, her voice tinged with a slight sob. I thought to myself, 6 years without contact, and her acting has really improved. If she'd put as much effort into her craft as she did in manipulating Charles, with her innocent looks, she'd probably be famous by now. But someone with such misplaced ambition won't last long in this industry. Actors like her, I'd never give her good opportunities. Oh, so you're really amnesiac now? I took a step toward her, but Charles stopped me. Chloe, don't be like this. Miriam always thought of you as a friend. Really? I glanced at Charles, then at Miriam. I don't care to discuss how you two broke up, but I'll never forget how you both humiliated me at the wedding yesterday, and then twisted the knife today. Chloe! Charles's expression darkened. Why? Charles? Did you forget how, after you broke up with her, you were a mess, unable to sleep, drinking yourself sick, until I dragged you out on a cross-country trip to help you recover? Did you forget how I tirelessly sought out opportunities for you? How I begged on your behalf when you messed up on set and had to apologize for your behavior? How I stayed up for days just to help you land your favorite endorsement, even waiting outside the corporate headquarters to meet the CEO? Enough! Charles shouted, yanking his hand out of mine. I never asked you to do any of that. He turned, his eyes red, and continued, each word cutting deeper. Chloe, did you do all that for me? Or for yourself? Wasn't it you who said you couldn't act, so you became a manager? You were the one with ambition, the one who wanted to start a company. You said you wanted to escape your family, leave your hometown, break free from the people who disgusted you. So this is how he really saw me, with a sharp slap. I cut off everything, the 20 years we'd shared, and any last hopes I had. I'd always thought he understood me, that, for a few fleeting moments, he'd cared about me, maybe even loved me. But now I realized that all my years of effort had been nothing but a joke. Charles wasn't worth it. Charles! Seeing him get slapped, Miriam jumped up, still with that innocent, tearful look. She looked at me with wide, watery eyes and said, if you have a problem, take it out on me. Charles has always been good to you. Why would you hit him? He's an actor. If you injure him, how will he work? Fighting back tears, I glanced at this two-faced pair, shook my head, and said, there won't be any more next time. Charles, this is the end. From now on, you're you, and I'm me. We're done. All ties severed. I walked out, head held high despite my bleeding heart, each step resolute. At the hospital entrance, reporters swarmed me. Miss Song, was it really your interference that led to Koo and Miss Lou's breakup 6 years ago? Are you here to apologize for that? Apologize? I scoffed, glaring at the reporters. Would you apologize if someone stabbed you in the back? Chloe, there's no need to be so harsh. One reporter complained. Why curse people like that? And why is it okay to ask me questions based on lies? I shot back. If you don't like my answers, don't ask me for an interview. I wasn't afraid of the cameras or the probing questions. Whenever Charles faced reporters, I was the one shielding him. When dealing with rude reporters, I never held back. I'd protected him so many times, for so many years, when he was bullied by his peers, when he was looked down on by producers before he became famous, and when malicious questions came after his success, who was always there to defend him. But he'd never protected me, not once. Today's storm of accusations, all of this, he brought it upon me. Why did I ever love someone like this? Chapter 8. I took a deep breath, turned to the cameras, and clarified. I am not a homewrecker. Before Charles proposed, we were nothing more than work partners and friends. There was no romantic involvement before that. I put in countless hours to help build his career, and after he achieved fame, he proposed to thank me in front of everyone. I accepted out of respect. That's all. This is the first and last time I'll explain this. Don't ask me again. I made it clear, the empire Charles and I built together. He turned against me to defend his ex, humiliating me on our wedding day. Originally, I hadn't planned to say much, but since Charles didn't consider my side, I felt no need to protect him. When the reporters asked more questions, I ignored them. I'd said my piece, and they could believe whatever they wanted. But as I pushed through the crowd toward the parking lot, someone suddenly pointed at me, shouting, "She's lying! She's the other woman." 6 years ago, less than 3 months after Charles and Miriam broke up, she had an abortion. My mind went blank. I have proof. This is a photo I took at the time. He held up a picture, which the reporters snapped eagerly, refocusing their attention on me. Just as I was contemplating abandoning my car and making a run for it, a black car pulled up beside me. The door opened, and someone waved me over. "Chloe, get in." I reached out, took Benjamin's hand, and climbed into the car with his help. "Are you all right?" he asked, looking at me with concern. "I'm fine." I shook my head slightly. What else could happen? It was just more old, rotten secrets being dug up. Take me to the office. Chapter 9. When I returned, Julia was the first to greet me. "Chloe, are you all right?" I forced a faint smile. "I'm managing." Julia was one of the few who knew the full story. Noticing that I wasn't in the mood to discuss it, she simply gave my hand a comforting squeeze. "I've prepared a press statement for damage control. Take a look." As head of the PR department, Julia was adept at handling these situations. We'd crafted statements and evidence for this scenario years ago, so I wasn't worried about any significant backlash. "Let's go with this," I said, taking the glass of water Benjamin had poured for me. I thanked him, then turned to both of them. "I'd like to be alone for a while." "All right, we'll be just outside if you need us." Benjamin looked at me with concern, but Julia pulled him out of my office. I sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing down at the bustling city below, feeling momentarily dazed. I remembered how, 6 years ago, when I first discussed starting a company with Charles, he hadn't been supportive. He thought that with his fame, he could make plenty of money without the need for a company, which would only add stress. If the business failed, it could wipe out everything he'd earned. But in the end, I convinced him. I wanted to promote talented artists who were struggling in silence. I wanted to create a comfortable environment for actors, free from shady deals or exhausting auditions. My principles were simple: no forced networking, no unethical practices. Contracts were transparent and fair, with no exorbitant penalties if someone wanted to leave for a better opportunity. 5 years later, no artist has ever requested to terminate their contract. They've all expressed satisfaction with the company. This has always been my pride. But Charles might become the first artist to end his contract. On paper, Charles was the company's owner, and people assumed he provided the funding. In reality, Julia supplied the capital, and I did the legwork, securing resources. Naturally, I prioritized Charles with the best opportunities. Charles got the top projects, earned the most money, and received glowing publicity, both inside and outside the industry. He's revered. His fan base, which I helped maintain, is strong and devoted. 4 years. He's had everything he wanted, facing no obstacles. Charles, have I ever wronged you? Chapter 10. Julia quickly released the PR statement once the rumors about my supposed abortion began trending. This scandal ultimately dissolved into a dramatic mess. Julia entered my office to report the positive response. "Not all netizens are clueless. Some are even complimenting you." Comments. "I have endometriosis too. My doctor told me that having kids might help, as the menstrual pause during pregnancy can improve things." These reporters are ridiculous. Just because someone goes to a gynecologist doesn't mean they're pregnant or having an abortion. We shouldn't tolerate reporters like this. Some paparazzi have no morals. Chloe is tough. She's always defended her artists from paparazzi attacks. And now that she's under fire, she's fighting alone without flinching. Some even started calling me a modern independent woman. The narrative shifted fast. I handed the iPad back to Julia. "Prepare a termination contract for Charles." "You got it," Julia said, taking the iPad. "I thought you might soften up because of all the years you've known him. If it weren't for this mess, I might have had a bit of pity. After all, I'd built him from the ground up. But he's no longer the Charles the first knew. You're doing the right thing, Chloe, if it were me, I wouldn't just end the contract, I'd blacklist him. I'm not powerful enough to blacklist him. Still, I could recoup some of his benefits. With this scandal, his career would certainly take a hit. I was weighing how ruthless I should be when Julia rushed back into my office an hour later. Chloe, check the trending news now. What happened? Julia rarely lost her composure, especially after years in this industry. The last time I saw her this anxious was when she accompanied me for surgery. Everyone says I'm rational, but Julia is even more so. She's been by my side for years. My partner in battle. I took out my phone to see the top trending hashtag, Chloe fakes condition, is actually pregnant. I clicked on it to find a secretly recorded video of Miriam's hospital room. In the video, Miriam, is what people are saying true? Did Chloe really have a child for you? No, Miriam, I swear, it wasn't my child. Are you sure? I swear. But Chloe didn't have a boyfriend at the time. I don't know, she never told me about a child. The video cut off abruptly, ending with Charles holding Miriam in his arms. As she murmured she believed him. With that, Julia's PR efforts were completely undone. Chapter 11. My hand shook as I held my phone, feeling as if a poisoned blade had pierced my heart. What hurt wasn't Charles denying the child, but that he could so easily assure Miriam that it had nothing to do with him. That child was conceived the night we returned from our road trip. We'd both had too much to drink, and things just happened. When I discovered I was pregnant, I immediately planned to terminate it. I told him, and he agreed, to avoid rumors. I kept him out of the process. I went to the clinic either alone or with Julia, for PR purposes. Julia and I had fabricated the cyst story and gathered evidence, though I'd never needed to involve Charles. But I never expected him to deny it so thoroughly, swearing it had nothing to do with him. Why couldn't he have just denied I'd ever been pregnant? Chloe, Julia looked at me, visibly worried. Benjamin entered then, carrying a cup of coffee. Don't panic. This may not be as severe as it seems. I watched the video again, analyzing Charles's tone and expressions. The video captured Charles from behind, so only his voice was audible until he hugged Miriam at the end. He likely just wanted to calm Miriam down, unaware that a hidden camera was recording everything. Thinking back to that child 6 years ago, my heart felt heavy. I'd never seriously considered having the baby back then, but it was a life, and I'd loved Charles deeply. If he'd shown even the slightest inclination for me to keep it, I might have been willing to go through with it. But he hadn't wanted it then, and now, 6 years later, he still had no compassion for the fact that I'd lost that child for his sake. As I watched the video a third time, Julia took my phone. I'll prepare a lawsuit. Julia, my best friend, knew exactly what steps to take to handle this. From this moment forward, Charles and I were on completely opposite sides. Our 20 years together were now shattered, severed beyond repair. I'll take care of it. You stay with Chloe. Benjamin placed the coffee cup in Julia's hands, reminding her, don't forget, I majored in law in college. Chapter 12. The legal notice from our company soon reached Charles. Julia also released an official statement from the company's main account, explaining that Charles was unaware of my surgery's nature and had mistakenly thought it was an abortion procedure. The statement emphasized the severe impact of his words on me and requested a public apology from Charles. Otherwise, we'd pursue legal action for defamation. Charles called me several times, but I didn't answer. Finally, he sent me a message. Chloe, do you really need to go this far? Going too far? Who was the one who pushed this to the edge? I replied with a single line, come to the office to sign the termination agreement when you have time. Fine. Termination. Is it? Terminate it is. But don't forget, I'm responsible for half of this company's success. Half? I couldn't believe how thick-skinned Charles had become. Under public pressure and to protect his career, Charles eventually posted a statement. He claimed he'd spoken without knowing all the facts, that he'd only heard about my surgery and didn't know its specifics. He explained he'd been trying to reassure his girlfriend and only realized it was a cyst surgery after seeing my medical records. Girlfriend. Just days after ditching me at our wedding, Miriam had become his girlfriend. Netizens quickly latched onto the girlfriend part. Comments. Wait, didn't Ku just bail on Chloe's wedding? How is Miriam suddenly his girlfriend? Yeah, this is shady. I'm starting to think the smear campaign against Chloe might have come from them. Same here. This looks like they planned it. Chloe's wedding gets wrecked. She's labeled a homewrecker. And now he's cozying up with his ex like some tragic love story. That line, I hoped you'd shield me from the storms. But in the end, you were the one who brought them. It's so fitting. And it was always Chloe who protected Ku from everything. She's the most dedicated manager I've ever seen. I'm a small-time actor myself. Chloe is wonderful. She doesn't just look after Ku. She treats all her artists well. Hey, I know who you are. You were scouted by Chloe after a web series and went on to do bigger projects. My new series is out in a couple of months. Show your support. With a few fans leading the way, netizens quickly rallied to my side. Several of our artists publicly spoke up for me. And soon, many people believed the entire situation was a scheme by Miriam. They speculated that her car accident and amnesia were fabricated, her goal being to prevent the wedding and reunite with Charles while generating buzz for her comeback. It sounded quite plausible. The next morning, Charles showed up at the company under heavy public scrutiny. Chloe! He rushed in, ignoring his assistant's attempts to stop him. I was in the middle of a meeting with senior staff and shareholders. His timing was impeccable. Let's talk in private, he said, calming his voice when he noticed the people in the room. There's nothing private to discuss. Termination is a significant matter for the company, so we'll discuss it here, I replied, keeping my tone strictly professional. Yes. I said the wrong thing at the hospital, but it was a slip of the tongue. Miriam had amnesia from the car accident and didn't remember anything from the past few years. I was only trying to explain things to her. I didn't want to hurt her. So to avoid hurting her, you decided to hurt me? I stood, meeting his gaze. Charles, we've known each other for over 20 years. I thought you'd at least consider my feelings. He lowered his head, guilt evident in his posture. I'm sorry. He knew that the issue with the child had cut me deeply. I signaled for the termination papers, placing them in front of him. Sign here. As for your shares, I can buy them at a fair price, or you can keep them for dividends, but I recommend selling to avoid future disputes. Chloe, I misspoke. Do you have to go this far? Even now, he thought it was just a simple slip. Chapter 13. I didn't want to waste any more words. You can choose not to terminate the contract, but I won't provide you with any more opportunities. Don't forget, this company was built with Julia's funds and my hard work. Your status today was won by Julia and me. Night after night. You can deny the time and energy we invested in you, but I'd love to see what you have left without me and this company. Chloe, do you have to be so harsh? Yes, I wronged you with the wedding and the child. But don't overestimate yourself. You want to terminate? Fine. Let's terminate. I'll see how much this company makes without Charles. He grabbed the pen, signed his name, and stormed out. Everyone watched as Charles came in heated and left even more furious. After he left, I addressed the staff. Some of you may think Charles is still the company's owner. Today, I'd like to clarify, I'm the company's legal representative. And Julia and I control all resources. Charles's departure means his resources will now be available to you. Of course, if anyone wishes to follow him, I won't stop you. Chloe, I'm with you. Same here, Chloe. I'll stay at this company as long as you'll have me. Count me in. I remember you picking me out from those tiny roles. I'm not going anywhere. Not a single person expressed any desire to leave. Of course, this wasn't solely out of loyalty. They understood that I held the resources to elevate their careers. If Charles's opportunities were redistributed, those who stayed would benefit for years to come. Charles had always been distant, even when he was lesser known, and fame only widened the gap between him and the team. Most people at the company didn't know him well. No one was willing to risk alienating Julia and me over someone they barely knew. Chapter 14. In this age of information, stories might blow up fast, but they also fade quickly. Within a week, people stopped discussing the wedding scandal and the abortion drama. I redistributed Charles's resources among other promising artists. Many were equally talented but had lacked the right opportunities. Benjamin, in particular, had potential. I gave him a smaller project as a test, and he accepted it gratefully. "Thank you. I thought you might be disappointed that I only gave you a small budget script." "Not at all," Benjamin said earnestly. "Small productions can be breakout hits." His mindset was leagues ahead of Charles's. "Go on and make the most of it. We'd promised to give each other 3 years. This production moves fast, so I'll be heading out tomorrow. Take care of yourself while I'm gone." I was touched by the thoughtfulness of someone so much younger than me. For the week we'd shared a roof, he'd treated me like family. He prepared breakfast and dinner every day. He remembered my favorite iced Americano, that I disliked scallions and cilantro, and which fruits I loved. All the details Charles had never remembered in our 20 years together, Benjamin picked up in 1 week. He genuinely cared for me, and maybe he was smart enough to know it would win my favor, making me more invested in his career. The project I'd given him was small, but based on my industry experience, it had all the makings of a surprise hit. The shoot was taking place out of town, and on the day he left, I went to the airport to see him off. By coincidence, we ran into Charles and Miriam. Among the cheers of his fans, Charles held Miriam's hand, leading her toward the security gate. Watching their fingers entwined, I felt an uncomfortable pang in my chest. So many years, only to end up like this. "Don't forget, you're a married woman now." Benjamin pulled me into a hug and whispered in my ear, "Take care, my wife." The term felt strange. It was the first time he'd called me wife, and he did so in front of so many people. Some fans nearby recognized us and started snapping photos. I heard a few whispers, "Wow, I'm starting to like this couple, and Benjamin is really handsome, even more than Charles." But Charles's fans weren't pleased. "You guys must be blind. This kid is barely grown. Our coup is way more handsome." "Exactly. Lou and Miriam are the true power couple. Those two can just go away." "All right, we should stop before it gets too awkward. If you don't go now, you'll miss your flight." I nudged Benjamin, who reluctantly let go. "Take care, sis." Before he left, he added, "Don't care about what others say. You're the best." "Got it." Such a kid, trying to act mature. Seeing his innocent smile, I waved him off with a grin. "Go on, get going." When I returned to the office, Julia approached me with a juicy tidbit. "Guess what? Charles just signed with Empire Entertainment, our biggest rival." Chapter 15. I know. I actually just saw some of their people at the airport. I wasn't surprised at all by Charles joining Empire Entertainment. If anything, it was exactly as expected. With the scandal he stirred up and the termination of his contract with us, a lot of big brands are bound to cut ties with him. He's facing a lot of penalties and negative publicity. He wouldn't settle for a small agency. But the major companies have their own established stars. Empire Entertainment, our constant rival, is the only one likely to bring him on at a high price. Thinking about it, I summarized, they probably think they've landed a prized asset. Just wait. Julia clapped her hands in an exaggerated show of approval. "Wow, that's our song. Breaking it down so well. I'd say you're completely over him?" I swiveled my chair, gazing out at the sunset, and replied, "I think I'll finally be over it when the day comes that he regrets everything. Letting go of over 20 years of history wasn't that easy. Just wait. It won't be long before he comes crawling back. I know some inside gossip Empire Entertainment is no haven." Not long after that conversation, word spread that Charles had clashed with a producer on a new reality show and threatened to walk out. His first gig with the new company was a dating show, which explained why he'd gone hand in hand with Miriam. Empire had apparently failed to clarify the show's requirements, and Charles only realized too late that he'd be filmed 24/7. Even while he slept, with all his interactions with Miriam recorded and subject to editing. When he asked to remove some intimate footage, the crew refused and even showed him the contract. In the end, Miriam managed to convince him to allow some of the footage to be kept, with only the most personal moments edited out. And that wasn't the only hiccup. Several scripts Empire selected for him included scenes he found unacceptable. I wasn't actively keeping track of his struggles, but with Julia treating it like daily work updates, I couldn't escape the constant news. After a few days, it started grating on my nerves. After a serious warning from me, Julia finally gave my ears a rest. Though the peace didn't last, since she ended up going on a business trip. Chapter 16. Even on her trip, Julia couldn't leave me in peace. One night, just as I was wrapping up work and getting ready to relax, she bombarded me with calls. Check the news, now. Thinking it must be something major, I looked it up, only to find Charles trending, again. This time, it was because he and Miriam had been caught arguing on the reality show set. It all started over something trivial. The two of them were in the kitchen, and a sweet moment soured when they began arguing over whether to use a large or small bowl for the soup. Charles had always been stubborn and set on his ways, insisting that things go according to his vision, while Miriam was used to being spoiled. She believed a boyfriend should cater to her, so she didn't budge. It was a familiar pattern. I remembered how they'd often clashed over small things 6 years ago. Back then, Charles would vent to me, pouring out his frustrations and asking for help making things right. This time, though, their petty argument spiraled into a heated public scene. Charles again threatened to quit filming, causing quite a stir. Reportedly, his new manager had asked him to apologize to the director and crew, but Charles refused outright. The director, a highly respected figure, openly criticized Charles in response, saying he'd never work with this kind of star again. Charles eventually withdrew from the show, forfeiting a significant sum to the network. The show seized the opportunity, securing several trending topics and gaining pre-release buzz. When it finally aired, the show was a hit, and audiences loved the new couple who'd replaced Charles and Miriam. Incidentally, that new couple happened to be from my company. I couldn't help but wonder how Charles felt now, handing his spotlight over to others. Chapter 17. At a commercial gala a month later, I crossed paths with Charles and Miriam. Benjamin accompanied me to the event. I introduced him to a few prominent directors and producers, and once he seemed well engaged, I snuck off to a quiet corner. In the crowd, I glimpsed Charles, once someone who others had eagerly served drinks to. He was now bowing and scraping to prominent directors, who dismissed him, leaving his glass untouched. Seeing this stirred mixed feelings in me. For 6 years, even during his hardest times, I'd never let him suffer like this. But Charles had taken everything I'd given him for granted. Just then, a familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. Chloe, you must feel quite satisfied seeing him like this. Miriam approached, holding a glass of red wine, dressed in a beige gown with impeccable makeup. She'd come to the event expecting Charles to open doors for her, only to find that his once high status had left him isolated after burning so many bridges. Satisfied? Not really. But seeing you two stumbling around like panicked clowns? Now, that is a bit entertaining. Miriam seemed at a loss, taken aback by my bluntness. Though I'd chosen a quieter corner, this was still the refreshment area, so several people were nearby. Chloe, I really don't remember these past 6 years. I didn't mean for things to go this way at your wedding, Miriam said as she took a step closer. Glass in hand, her words dripping with apology. A warning bell went off in my mind. She was up to something. As I stepped back to avoid her, she moved faster, splashing her wine all over her dress. Her dramatic gasp drew immediate attention. Chloe, I know you hate me and think I stole Charles, but we were together first. Charles and I truly love each other. I rolled my eyes internally. You threw wine on me, and I'll accept it. Chloe, I only ask that you stop leaking blackmail and let him focus on his work. Her insinuation couldn't have been clearer. She was accusing me of all the recent tabloid rumors about them. A crowd began forming around us, some even taking videos and pictures. So it's been Chloe leaking all the negative stories? Quite the grudge. Of course. Did you see what the director posted? That was because of her. She's ruthless. Miriam's so innocent. And she even lost her memory. Chloe didn't have to embarrass her publicly. Enough with the acting. Miriam, for someone who claimed to have lost 6 years of memory, her tactics seemed about as advanced as a 6-year-old's. She hadn't even noticed I was holding a glass of white wine. Before I could explain, a hand suddenly shoved me aside, shielding the fragile Miriam. The push spilled wine across the front of my dress. Chloe, if you have a problem, take it out on me. Miriam's done nothing wrong. Why target her? Charles took off his jacket and wrapped it around Miriam, who was drenched in wine. Charles, Maybe you should find a mirror in the restroom. Seeing you now makes me sick. And as for you, Miriam, I think you've lost your intelligence, not your memory. I stepped closer to her, holding up my half-full glass. Then I emptied the rest of my white wine over her head. Next time you try to frame me, maybe grab a glass of the same wine I'm holding. Wow, Chloe is so cool. Someone record this. I knew it. Miriam's totally a snake. I, Chloe, am straightforward. I'll own up to what I do, but no one pins their nonsense on me. As for you two parasites, I hope I never see you again. Thanks to you polluting the headlines, I've started avoiding the entertainment news altogether. Spend money to trend you too? I'd rather burn it. With that, I turned to leave, uninterested in lingering another second. I turned around to see Benjamin making his way through the crowd. He draped his jacket over my shoulders, wrapped his arm around me, and said, "Let's go home." Once outside, he flashed me a thumbs up. Classic Chloe. Brave and sharp as always. I thought you might step in as the knight in shining armor. I teased. I'd given him the chance to make a heroic gesture, even mentally planning a headline like "Protective Husband Defends Wife." Small stuff like this, I knew you could handle it on your own. His words were reassuring. I'd been concerned he'd jump at the chance for publicity. I want people to know me for my work, not for being attached to you. This comment left me with a newfound respect for him. Chapter 18. The events at the gala trended on social media the very next day. This only worsened Charles and Miriam's already fragile career prospects. Without holding back, I retweeted a fan's video of the incident with my own message: "Heroes may face hardship, but my boundaries are not to be crossed. For the sake of our 20+ years together, I once turned a blind eye to your actions. But today, I'm making it clear, so long as I, Chloe, am here, you two will never have a chance to rise again." It was a harsh statement, enough to make them lose opportunities in the industry for the foreseeable future. My post received support from numerous A-list actresses, prominent brands, and respected directors and producers I'd collaborated with in the past. Of course, Miriam and Charles's die-hard fans weren't pleased, but aside from them, others gave their approval. After all, they had wronged me first. A counterattack was only fair. Because of this, Charles lost over 1 million followers in a single day. Although he eventually issued a public apology, it came too late, and people weren't buying it. Naturally, I ignored his apology. "Charles, I told you I would make you regret this. And this is only the beginning." Chapter 19. My goal was to make Benjamin more popular than Charles ever was, within 3 years. So, I poured all my focus into him. We started with a 2-month acting course abroad. By the time we returned, the low-budget web drama he'd filmed was airing. As I'd expected, it became a hit. The chemistry between him and the female lead was strong, and by the time the show ended, his follower count had grown from 1 million to over 5 million, and it was still climbing. Over the course of the series, the show trended more than 20 times, with Benjamin himself trending in 11 of them. Afterward, I secured him several quality scripts, and it looked like he'd be spending most of the coming year on set. "I don't know if I want fame that much," he mumbled, seeing the packed schedule I'd set for him, before stopping himself under my warning glare. "Work hard for 2 years. I reminded him. "I promised to make you a top star within 3 years. After all, he had trusted me enough to stand by my side at the wedding. Besides, what aspiring star doesn't want to reach the top? To leave a lasting mark? All right, I'll work hard for 2 years. Then," he replied, lowering his gaze as he took the script from my hand. I had to admit, Benjamin was exceptionally talented. He hadn't trained in acting. I'd scouted him from a background role on a campus show. He was a law major. After all, that year, the company had been looking for a third male lead for a legal drama. His performance was well received. Beyond his acting skills, his looks were flawless, making him versatile for any role. But he was still young and hadn't faced the harsh side of fame independently. He still needed me with him at major events. Every time I accompanied him to these events, we'd trend on social media together. At first, everyone knew our marriage was an arrangement. But more recently, headlines like "Is #foreveryours couple real?" or hashtag Forever Yours couple sweet moments kept popping up. Some fans even suggested I make my debut as an actress and star in a drama based on our story with Benjamin. These rumors led Julia to tease me, asking if I was developing feelings for him. Benjamin's a good kid. His eyes are full of admiration for you. He's leagues better than that jerk Charles, she added with a guilty look, knowing she'd accidentally mentioned Charles. After the gala incident, they had stopped talking about Charles around the office. Everyone assumed he was a painful memory I didn't want revisited. In truth, it wasn't so dramatic. With each time Charles hurt me for Miriam, he mattered less and less. Benjamin and I have a contract. When our 3 years are up, he'll be an employee, and I'll be his boss. Nothing more. As I finished speaking, I looked up to see Benjamin coming in with a coffee. I thought you might need a boost for the afternoon, he said, handing me the cup. I took it, smiling. Thank you. He seemed hesitant to leave, so I asked, is there something else? No, nothing, he replied before heading out, with Julia watching his retreating figure with amusement. Oh, Chloe, I think someone has a little crush. Don't start, I warned. Diving back into work, Benjamin was attractive, talented, and quickly rising. He was likely to reach career heights many spend years trying to attain. When that time comes, he'll have endless options. Even now, if it weren't for our marriage contract, he'd have girls chasing him by the dozen. I might have money and connections, but there's nothing special about me that would make him fall for me. And as for me, I've long since stopped letting my heart soften for any man. This arrangement was mutually beneficial, a logical agreement between adults. Chapter 20. I saw Charles again one evening, about a year later. I had just finished dinner with a client and was about to leave when I saw him vomiting outside the restaurant. His manager was there, scolding him instead of helping. Figures. Pampered by Star Media. But just look at that tolerance. How can a director be satisfied with this? Why would anyone want to cast you? Charles stood, glaring at his manager. I came here just as you asked. What else do you want from me? Do you want me to drink myself to death? What's with the attitude? You still think you're some A-lister? You could die drinking, and it wouldn't guarantee you a single role. His manager yanked him toward the restaurant, muttering, I finally managed to get Director Yi to come here. If he leaves because of you, even a small role is out of the question. Charles clenched his fists, wanting to lash out but knowing he couldn't afford to. He swallowed his anger and followed. I was about to slip away when his manager spotted me. Oh, isn't it the song who's making bigger waves than her own artists? His sarcastic tone grated on my nerves. Ignoring him, I glanced briefly at Charles. I have things to do. I'll be going. See that? The Chloe who once saw you as a prize now sees you as trash. Watching her trending won't bring her back. Something in that remark must have struck a nerve in Charles because he tore free of his manager's grip and shouted, Chloe! I paused and slowly turned to face him, too tired to respond. Chloe! Are you really done with me? He asked, taking a step closer, his breath heavy with alcohol, making my stomach churn. Chloe, I know I was wrong. Can you forgive me? Under the restaurant's bright lights, I could see his face clearly, haggard, weary, his bloodshot eyes still clinging to hope. I remembered the years I'd spent hoping for him to come back, the long hours I'd waited at the wedding. That 3-hour wait at the wedding was the longest of my life. Even as time dragged on, I clung to the hope that he'd return. But he didn't. Charles, do you think you're still worthy? I said, coldly walking away, just as I had in the hospital that day, ending things cleanly. I'd thought it would take a lifetime to move on, that the ties of 20 years wouldn't sever easily. But in just a year, Charles felt so distant, both as a name and a person. I'd heard bits and pieces about his life since then. He and Miriam argued constantly, initially generating a lot of gossip, but even the tabloids had grown tired of them. Then there were his drinking sessions with directors, which also lost media interest over time. Eventually, even his agency stopped issuing statements on his behalf. In this fast-paced, fame-driven world, it's easy to rise, but once the spotlight dims, it's hard to reclaim it. For someone like Charles, essentially blacklisted, A comeback was nearly impossible. So, when I heard he'd caught the interest of a wealthy woman, I wasn't surprised. That was his choice. Chapter 21. The day before Charles sought me out, a video of him and Miriam arguing went viral. In it, Miriam berated him. So, you've really sunk so low that you're clinging to some old woman? Do you have any shame? Charles shot back. Oh, and you're any better? How many disgusting old men have you slept with? What? I only drank with him. At least I didn't sit in some old woman's lap like you. Without Chloe. You're nothing. I even went through all that to get back with you. And I can't believe Before she could finish, he grabbed her by the neck. What did you say? Charles hated hearing that he was nothing without me. So I wasn't surprised he reacted so violently. You went through all that to get back with me? So, the accident and the memory loss were all an act, weren't they? But Miriam wouldn't admit it. I never said that. Don't lie to me. I figured it out during the dating show. So, he'd known all along. Yet he hadn't felt guilty. Hadn't apologized to me even once. If things had gone well for him and Miriam, if they'd regained their footing in the industry, he'd never have regretted leaving me. He might have even boasted about it. But life didn't go his way. So, when he came to beg for forgiveness, even kneeling before me, I couldn't muster any pity. Charles, I told you at the hospital, we're finished. Don't humiliate yourself further. I know I was wrong. Chloe. Please, give me another chance. I want to come back to you. Leave. I pushed him away and walked off. Chloe, are you really going to let 20 years end like this? Can't you give me a sliver of mercy? Charles, where do you get the nerve to ask me that? Chloe, just trust me one more time. I'll listen to you. I promise. Let's start over. I love you. Chloe, I truly love you. To think he dared to use the word love, it was an insult to the very notion. You must not understand plain language. My wife asked you to leave. Benjamin interjected, striding over and grabbing Charles by the collar, throwing him aside. Chloe, do you think he loves you? Do you think he'd still want you if he knew the truth about your past? About who you really are? I shot a glare at Charles. Get back with me, and I won't bring up the past. Charles, do you think you can threaten me with this? Chloe, I'm the only one who can accept you. Who can accept that you're the daughter of a murderer? Who can accept that you had an abortion? Because that child was mine. With a loud thud, Benjamin punched Charles, sending him crashing into a nearby vase. I watched Charles, sneering, willing to exploit everything, tearing open my wounds again and again. I suddenly felt exhausted. Call security to throw him out, Benjamin ordered. Oh, and one more thing, Charles has lost his mind. Let's keep what he said to ourselves. Anyone caught spreading rumors will answer to me. Yes, sir. Chapter 22. Charles was swiftly escorted out of the building by security. After this last desperate move failed, he turned to the media, revealing everything he knew. By the next day, news about my mother being a murderer was everywhere. Reading the headlines, I felt no particular emotions, just a sense of irony. It had taken me over 20 years to see how deeply someone could betray me. Yes, my mother was a murderer. She'd killed my father because he'd abused her and nearly beaten me to death. I openly shared my story, not out of a need to explain or defend myself, but simply to end the lingering shadows of my past. We don't choose the families we're born into, but we can choose our lives. I am grateful for my mother. She brought me into this world and became the bravest person alive for me. I've been waiting for the day she's free. The public's response surprised me. They were more understanding and supportive than I'd expected. Some sympathetic netizens even investigated and confirmed my story. Many even petitioned for my mother's case to be reconsidered, arguing that she deserved a lighter sentence. While complete exoneration was impossible, after all, a life had been lost, their advocacy, coupled with my mother's good behavior, led to a sentence reduction. It brought me closer to the day I'd see her again. Chapter 23. Time moved forward, drawing me and Benjamin nearer to the end of our 3-year agreement. With just a year left, he reached an extraordinary milestone, winning Best Actor at the prestigious Golden Awards. At the award ceremony, he publicly thanked me, Getting into acting was unplanned. I remember walking onto a set by chance, just trying to find a friend, when someone asked me to step into a scene. After that, I thought acting was interesting, and as I was wondering how to try it again, Chloe approached me. Chloe is the most sincere, caring manager I've ever met and the best boss for any artist. She's also the perfect wife. So, this award, I'd like to dedicate it to her. I hope she stays happy. And if possible, I'd like to spend my life protecting her. His words were met with thunderous applause. Most actors see their careers dim somewhat after marriage, but Benjamin's only grew brighter. I was thrilled for him. Whether or not his speech was heartfelt or partly a performance, I found myself deeply moved. As I walked toward him to accept the trophy, he embraced me. All of this came from the heart. Sis, he whispered. Thank you. After that night, his fees skyrocketed, and major brands lined up to sign him. Big-budget films and top-rated shows flooded in. Even if he worked non-stop, he couldn't take on every offer. Aside from work, there seemed to be a subtle shift in our relationship. Whenever he was on set, he'd call or video me after shoots to chat. Even if I couldn't accompany him, if he had intimate scenes with female co-stars, he'd insist on using camera tricks. And when that wasn't possible, he'd explain it all to me afterward. But I didn't care about such things. He grew more attached, often asking for breaks only to stay at home with me, keeping me company. We'd spend hours walking in the park or watching movies together. He'd tell me I needed rest and enjoyment, insisting I take breaks from work. I had to admit, life felt unexpectedly pleasant. It was a kind of lightness and joy I'd never experienced with Charles. One day, he suggested we go out like a normal couple, maybe to catch a movie. We ended up recognized by fans in a shopping mall, and after a hasty escape, he sighed. So, this is the price of fame. I miss normal life. The day I picked you, you lost the chance to live normally. I teased. Then just stay with me, and I won't need to leave the house. He laughed, holding my hand. In that moment, we felt like a real couple. Being with Charles had never felt like this. Sometimes I wondered if my love for Charles had just been habit, following him, caring for him, watching over him like a brother. But being with Benjamin felt like truly living. He cared for me, attended to my needs and emotions, and reminded me I was someone who could be cherished. Yet soon, these days would come to an end. Our 3 years were nearly up. It was time to talk about our separation. That evening, I ended work early and chose a cozy restaurant for our farewell dinner. I waited until 11 p.m., but instead of Benjamin, I received a call from the hospital. I couldn't believe it. Charles, still unable to let things go, had confronted Benjamin. During their fight, Charles picked up a shard of glass and stabbed him. Luckily, it wasn't a knife, or Benjamin's injuries could have been far worse. Rushing to the hospital, I entered Benjamin's room to see his parents by his bedside. His mother, visibly upset, was crying as his father gently comforted her. Benjamin had never mentioned his family. I'd assumed he came from an ordinary background. Who'd have thought he was the heir to the wealthiest family in Jiangqing? The renowned Fu family's heir had forsaken a fortune to become an actor. No wonder Charles's career had suffered so thoroughly after our split. I'd thought my influence was that strong. But in reality, Benjamin had been working behind the scenes. When I entered, the Fu couple gave me a look before politely excusing themselves to give us privacy. I'm sorry, Benjamin murmured, looking down. No, I'm the one who's sorry. Seeing the faintly visible wound wrapped in gauze, I felt a pang of guilt. Thank goodness it wasn't worse. Otherwise, I'd carry this regret for the rest of my life. Does it still hurt? I instinctively reached out to touch his bandage, but realizing our contract was ending soon, I withdrew my hand. Benjamin took hold of it, looking up with bright, unwavering eyes. It's not your fault. The only one to blame is that scumbag. Today is our 3rd anniversary, he said, looking remorseful. I was supposed to spend it with you. I hope you're not upset. As long as you're okay, that's all that matters. I even had a gift prepared. He handed me a small box. Under his expectant gaze, I opened it to reveal a diamond ring. I recognized it from a magazine. A priceless, Unique piece by a reclusive designer who hadn't released anything in years. On a recent trip to South Africa, I spotted this diamond and immediately thought, I'll have it made into a ring for the person I love most. The person he loved most. Could he really mean me? This is too valuable. I can't accept it. I closed the box and placed it aside. Compared to everything you've done for me these 3 years, this is nothing. He picked up the box again, opening it and trying to slip the ring onto my finger. I gently pulled my hand away. Let's wait until you're out of the hospital. All right. He mistook it for acceptance, his face lighting up with joy. He looked so radiant when he smiled, like sunlight at dawn, warm, bright, and gentle. Suddenly, I asked, why didn't you tell me who you were? He looked at me, his gaze intense. Because if I had, you wouldn't have chosen me as your groom, right? Caught off guard, I turned away, embarrassed. With your background, you don't need my help to succeed. The Fu family was a conglomerate, involved in countless industries, with his uncle in charge of the entertainment sector. I never planned on relying on my family. I promised them I'd make it on my own. Still, you should have told me. It feels wrong that the heir of the Fu family has been helping me behind the scenes. His parents probably thought I was trying to cling to wealth and power. Chloe, you once told me we can't choose our birth circumstances, but we can choose our lives. The family legacy is my parents', but what I achieve through my own efforts is mine, and that includes you. He added softly, that includes you. Recently, he'd been saying things that left me speechless. Didn't you get me a gift, Chloe? He looked at me with that familiar puppy-eyed expression. Whenever he'd done this in the past, I'd pat his head and call him a good little brother. Now, I felt a bit at a loss. The gift I'd prepared was our divorce papers, but given his injuries, this wasn't the right time. No. Just as I answered, there was a knock at the door, signaling his floor needed changing. I noticed his parents standing nearby, and a wave of awkwardness washed over me. As I stepped out, Mrs. Fu approached me. Ms. Song, might we have a word? Only now had Mrs. Fu sought me out for a talk. Her patience impressed me. Given how widely publicized our marriage had been, I'd assumed she'd have confronted me sooner. Graceful and poised, she seemed closer to 30 than her actual age of over 50. She studied me for a moment before speaking. I didn't object to you and Ben's arrangement, but with recent news about your background, her words were kinder than I expected. Mrs. Fu, rest assured, things between your son and me aren't as you might think. Yes, we're legally married, but I wasn't aware of his identity when we wed. When this situation is resolved, he and I will part ways. What he decides to do after that, whether he stays in the industry or returns to your family, isn't for me to say. Satisfied, the Fu family didn't make things difficult. They even praised me, calling me a savvy businesswoman. Yes, I am a businesswoman, and I know the risks of offending the Fu family. Chapter 24. Charles likely never imagined that his assault would target the Fu family's most cherished son. When the Fu family asked how I wanted them to handle him, I said, leave it to you. I won't intervene. Very well, they replied, clearly pleased with my decision. I never saw Charles again. Some said he was jailed. Others whispered he'd been dealt with discreetly. I didn't inquire further, nor did I need to. On Benjamin's discharge day, I didn't go to the hospital. Instead, I sent over the signed divorce papers along with the ring he'd given me. I knew we belonged in different worlds. If I'd come from a normal background, or if his family had been ordinary, I might have considered staying with him, but that wasn't the case. Back at the office, he called repeatedly. When I didn't answer, he texted. He said he didn't want a divorce, that he truly loved me and wanted a lifetime together. He assumed his parents' words had influenced me, but they hadn't. Even if he weren't from the Fu family, I'd never intended to make this permanent. A contract was a contract. In business, contracts are honored. After clarifying, I turned off my phone and set off on a solo trip. I planned to retrace my old path through Inner Mongolia, Tibet, and Xinjiang, taking in the breathtaking landscapes once more. The most cherished time of my life was 6 years ago. Traveling with Charles. Though we had little, I felt fulfilled, energized, and optimistic. I wanted to rediscover that spirited Chloe. Along one stretch of desert road, a man waved to flag me down. "Hey, beautiful, could you give me a ride? I can pay for it." His smirk turned sly as he mentioned payment, so I ignored him and drove on. "Sorry, we're not headed in the same direction." A bit further down the road, another man waved. After my previous experience, I was inclined to pass by, until I recognized him. It was Benjamin. Julia, the traitor, had insisted on regular location updates for my safety, only to turn around and share them with him. "Hey there, beautiful, could you give me a ride? I'll pay." He grinned, his bright smile and clear eyes gleaming in the sunlight. "Sorry, we're not headed in the same direction," I replied, using the same words I'd just used with the previous hitchhiker. Benjamin was young, full of life, with endless options ahead of him. We were on separate paths. I was no longer young. I didn't have time to waste, nor the heart to shoulder another man's youth. Benjamin. All I could do was wish him a brilliant future.